Welcome back. Thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Let's focus on the upcoming general election. So, does Kenya have enough police officers to secure the August polls? Security analysts say the party primaries have shown that there is a potential for scuffles even in the August general election. John Alanamu has a special report on that. Let's watch that and then we'll speak to him. He's here with me in studio.
Expecting to have 44,000 polling stations or 45,000 because that's how many BVR kits you have. Well, then you need 90,000 police.
But do we have enough police officers to secure this election? It's the night of the 25th of April, 2017. After a long day of voting, counting has begun in the Kisumu Central Parliamentary nominations. Already, it looks like there's a clear winner, Fred Ouda. Fast forward to 12 p.m. the following day, and the joy of a few hours earlier is nowhere to be seen.
Just for me to open the telly, and what I see in KTN is a live coverage of the same returning officer declaring Ken Obura Mirega, somebody who actually was even number 5 in the actual sense.
Fred Ouda's victory was taken from him in a nomination process that was widely seen as deeply flawed, and his supporters weren't having any of it. Ouda would eventually secure his nomination after petitioning the ODM Elections Board. This may have happened in Kisumu during the nominations, but violence broke out in many other parts of the country, in both Jubilee and NASA strongholds. Mostly on the day after the vote, when counting had taken place. And it could happen again after the main dance in August. After all, at both national and county level, this is a high-stakes election.
Everybody expected that in 2013, Kenya was going to go through what it went through in 2007 and 2008, and none of that occurred. We realized that the biggest challenge we would have would be the primaries, not even the elections, because there were too many people that were trying to take a hold of too few seats.
The National Cohesion and Integration Commission has already earmarked these 17 locations, all highlighted on this map in red, as potential violence hotspots, which the police say they are ready to secure. But there are other areas to be worried about. Lamu, Mandera, and Laikipia are 3 examples of the same. For over 1 year now, Mandera has been under a dawn-to-dusk curfew as the police battle the Al-Shabaab.
We see a proliferation of very basic, simple, improvised explosive devices that are being utilized against either police or military targets, and that's to try and destabilize these areas. But this is something that is going to be dealt with by the National Police Service.
In Laikipia and Baringo counties, the police and the military have mounted a joint operation to disarm bandits who have wreaked havoc in these semi-arid counties since late last year. Soaking in all this pressure and securing the country when the election comes will take boots on the ground. And that's where questions about the police's actual numbers are important. The National Police Service Commission's 2015-2016 annual report says that Kenya has 90,442 officers in the police service. These include administration police, regular police, and general service unit officers. But the government's delivery portal says that in 2013, Kenya had 93,165 officers, a figure that it claims has since grown to 119,165 officers in total. The numbers get even more confusing. In a speech delivered in February this year, President Kenyatta said that Kenya has 98,732 officers. The figures vary, but they make sense on election day in relation to one other number. This assumes that every single police officer can be deployed on election day.
There is a notion somehow that whatever numbers are on, personnel numbers are on the books, everyone can be deployed at any one moment. But our books are not up to date as far as how many cops are on leave, are retired, are sick, are dead.
We have more than enough police officers to secure the general elections, but more importantly, under the IG's office, he has access from a security perspective to not only the National Police Service, which comprises of Administration Police, which comprises of Directorate of Criminal Investigation, but he also has access to all the officers that fall under Kenya prisons. He has also access to all the officers that fall under Kenya Wildlife Services. And he also has access, for necessary, if he needs additional legs on the ground or manpower, to the National Youth Service.
We shared these contrasting figures with the police spokesman for clarification. He hadn't responded by the time we published this report. The Kenya Defence Forces Act also gives room for the deployment of the military to supplement the police force in order to restore law and order. Regarding violence related to the election, one historical trend could significantly reduce the chances of a nightmare scenario. With the exception of 2002 and 2007, every Kenyan election since 1992 has had a presidential election petition filed in court. This trend is also seen in other races. In 2013 alone, there were over 100 petitions filed in court over election results. This could mean that candidates who are unhappy with the outcome of an election are likely to seek justice in the court system and not on the streets. The IEBC is also projecting confidence in their performance in this year's election. But even as the country collectively hopes for the best, do the police have the numbers to prepare for the worst?
That story was done by John Alanamu. He's here in studio with me. Namu, good to see you. So it's interesting the way Andrew Franklin says, you know, it's not like on the election day we will deploy all police officers in the country. And then when you mentioned that for this upcoming general election, politicians may seek redress in court. But then that also leaves the question of their supporters. You know, the politicians may actually go in court, but then let's look at the supporters and how they will react to this. So again, I'll pose this question to you, the same question you've just ended with.
Yeah.
I remember at one passing out parade, President Uhuru Kenyatta said Kenya had surpassed the UN recommended ratio of between police and the civilians. So how prepared are we? What do the numbers look like?
Well, the numbers, as you can see, are contrasting. So on the one hand, we have just shy of 100,000. On the other hand, we have just more than 130. There was another quote that I left out that was attributed to the police that said we have 180 prepared for the election. So it's confusing in that regard. So we really don't have one solid number. And these are all from very credible governmental institutions. But I think the deeper question is about the quality of policing. So we have boots on the ground, we have bodies at the polling station, and we have people securing our borders. How many of these, because we're going to have to draw in the National Youth Service, we're going to have to draw in Kenya prisons.
Question
how many
is,
of
how
these,
much training have they gone through?
both the training as well as the quality in terms of being able to respond to issues like these.
Okay.
And this has been a most violent year, 1 year, in a lead up to the election. If you remember, just last year, actually, around this period, there were protests across the country over the IEBC and the resignation of the former commissioners. Yeah. And there were places where the police ran out of bullets to be able to do that. Our cameramen were on the ground watching as those things happen.
And the police are actually very critical to this entire process. You remember the ICC cases, you had Major General Hussein Ali being one of the suspects. Of course, that case was dropped. But just the fact that a police commissioner was actually part of the suspects says a lot about the involvement of the police in this entire process.
Well, it does, to the extent that they have to be at every polling station. If we have 45,000, that means we have 2 per polling station, meaning that we have 90,000 police deployed on one single day around the country. The police are crucial to the smooth running of an election, both in terms of quality, as I mentioned, but also in terms of numbers. But when it comes to the involvement of the police with regard to the election itself, I think we also have to think about how we'd be able to predict these kinds of scenarios. And to be fair, I mean, that's actually why in the Kriegler report and in subsequent reports after 2007, the recommendation was that we raise the ratio, we raise the number of police officers so that we're able to respond. Now, the government says that it's done that. The figures say different. So I think it's something that in coming days the police are going to have to clarify just to be able to give people certainty. And finally, Linda, is the hot conflicts that we already have. In Laikipia, in Baringo, in Mandera, in Lamu, in parts of Garissa. And you can see what the Al-Shabaab is trying to do. An Al-Shabaab that is severely debilitated in terms of its ability to attack is now using vehicle-bound IEDs to try and directly attack the police. And as Delano Kilu said in his presentation, to make it seem as if the police do not have the capacity to respond, which they do. But that it's really also a perception game, also to destabilize voting in that part of the country. That would be a key aim of a group like the Al-Shabaab.
Yeah, I remember ICT CS actually pointed to that a couple of months ago, and he said